Welcome to the Ascension Business Network. You are listening to the Leadership and Transformation podcast series. Our program is sponsored by Ascension Transformation Solutions, your business transformation technology partner. Steve Rayner will be your host for today's program.
Today we're going to be talking to Dr. David Spong. Dr. David Spong retired in 2004 after a 43-year career in the aerospace industry. During his career, he grew from an individual contributor in the engineering and technical disciplines to becoming vice president and general manager of Boeing airlift and tanker programs. In 1998, David led the $3 billion program to winning the highest honor for quality performance given in the United States, the Malcom Baldrige National Quality Award for Manufacturing. David was then promoted to President of Boeing Aerospace Support, a $4 billion business. There, David led the Aerospace Support Organization to achieving the 2003 Malcom Baldrige National Quality Award for service. David Spong is the only two-time winner of the Malcom Baldrige National Quality Award for two different organizations in two different sectors, both manufacturing and service. In 2017, David became the first recipient of the E. David Spong Lifetime Achievement Award from the Baldrige Foundation. This award, which bears his name, continues to be given to those like David who have made extraordinary contributions to quality in the United States. I'd like to introduce Bill Belgard, who's going to be joining me today in the interview. Welcome, Dr. David Spong. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
David, I want to go back in time a bit and talk a little bit about the C17 program, which was really an extraordinary, I think, example of a transformation of an organization. And you were a big part of that. First as the chief engineer in that program, and then later as the vice president and general manager of the program. What were the major problems facing the program when this whole big change began, and about what time frame?
I joined the C17 program in 1991, when it was a very troubled program. I remember that there was a writer for the LA Times called Ralph Vartabedian who liked to describe it as the troubled, beleaguered C17 program. And like all programs that get into trouble, there were many reasons. One of the major ones was that it was a fixed price contract with the US government, which sounds like a good idea, particularly if you're a taxpayer. But no one at the company and no one in the government had experience in managing such programs. On a typical cost-plus contract, when the government requests a change that will increase the cost, the contract will be adjusted accordingly. So the company engineers are used to making changes upon request. However, when you're on a fixed-price contract, and the company engineers make changes with no change in price, this leads to cost overruns. So when you're having difficulty keeping within budget, what do? You do bad stuff. You scrimp on quality, which causes lots of rework, which then impacts schedule and cost. Then you strive to make the schedule, which adds more cost. And so the program was behind schedule, over cost, and not of high quality. What else can go wrong? It doesn't mean that there were really bad people on the program. It just means that they were in an impossible situation. And of course, another thing that happens is the customer, which in this case is the US government procurement people, and the company people start to fight. They don't get along, and they don't cut each other any slack. I must admit, when I first joined the program, I wondered what sins I must have committed to be put on that program, and wondered how on earth we can ever fix it.
And how did the fixing begin? How did you get that program kind of turned around?
There were the usual three organizations involved: the USAF Program Office in Dayton, Ohio, the Defense Procurement Agency on site at the plant, and of course the company, the contractor. At a high-level meeting with the government, it was decided that we were going to fix the program. The top three people from the three organizations were reassigned and new leaders were brought in. One could feel that this was punishment for the people who were there, but really, I think it was, let's make a fresh start. The government and the company put in more money. There was literally a handshake between these three leaders to say, we're going to make this work. We did make it work by having joint meetings where you could say what was needed to be said. We formed teams between the government and the company such that during the review period, for example, both the government representative and the company representative stood up in the front of the room and defended where they were and where they were going. Whereas in the past, it was always the company person out there with everyone throwing rocks at him or her. It's amazing when you start to work together how you make progress. We also, within the company, not really related to this issue, embarked on a journey using the Malcom Baldrige criteria. The Baldrige Program was started in 1987. One of the founding fathers was Stanford McDowell, cousin of the founder of McDonnell Douglas, James McDowell. By 1991, James' son, John McDowell, was running the company, and he directed the company to use the Baldrige framework to help us improve. We on the C17 program were in deep trouble, so we latched onto the Baldrige criteria and started to use it internally. Basically, the framework is nothing extraordinary. It is a focus on processes, plus lots of leadership stuff. But basically, it was get your manufacturing, engineering, supply management, and all the processes that you manage under control, which we started to do. By the way, many of us did not believe in the criteria in those days. I certainly wasn't a believer. I'm grounded in physics and engineering, and that sort of stuff, soft stuff, wasn't terribly exciting to me. But I am an engineer, and I noticed as we went along and the score on the criteria improved, the whole program got better. So I thought maybe there's something to this criteria stuff. In 1997, we applied for the National Award. Up until then, it was all internal, but we didn't receive an award. The good news for me was that my boss, Don Kozlowski, who led the program to that point and was instrumental in turning it around, retired, which was the same time Boeing and McDonnell Douglas merged. So then we applied again in 1998, when now I was in charge, and we received the award. So I got all the credit, but obviously the real credit goes to the team working over those some 6 years to improve everything we were doing.
David, you achieved the Malcolm Baldrige Award in '98, and as you say, a lot of work had been done prior to that, leading up to that point. You're now in charge of the program. What other things were happening that helped sort of transform the culture that were even beyond what you were doing in the Baldrige area?
So how did the culture shift? I guess part of it is all the efforts are linked, and it's amazing what that does for a team. One illustration involves the blue-collar workforce, which is unionized with the United Auto Workers. When I joined the C17 program, we had what I would describe as the worst labor management relations I had ever seen. And in those days, maybe you remember it, we all wore suits. Every now and again, I'd walk across the factory floor, maybe to look at the airplane or to look at something. The basic reception I got from the workers was maybe not quite these words, but what the hell are you doing here? They knew that I wasn't a worker because I wasn't wearing coveralls. As time went on, we instituted a program then called employee involvement. I think these days it's more commonly called employee engagement. It was a means of building teams with the union workforce and basically empowering them to do good work. It really improved the working relationship within the company such that when I would walk out onto the factory floor later on, comments would be, "How can I help you? What are you looking for?" While of course nothing happens overnight, it was incredible in transforming the way we all work together. One thing you can't do with unions is to give bonuses to individual people, but you can give bonuses to everyone. We set up a cost-sharing program where we put a budget out which we knew we could live with in terms of the overall cost of the aeroplane. So if we beat the budget, then some portion of the money saved could be shared with the union workforce. I think there's nothing like a little bonus to make people work hard and do a good job. We had an occasion where an outside team was visiting us and toured our paint hangar. There was a small unionized work team in the paint hangar who were bragging about that they had reduced the size of their team using Lean, Six Sigma, and things like that. No one in the union ever bragged about reducing their workforce, but this team did. They were so proud of what they had done. And another takeaway. I remember I was in Long Beach for one round of contract negotiations with the UAW. I presume it's a standard that the company people sit on one side of a long table with the union leadership on the other side. Now, this was a big union. I mean, they came in from Detroit. The union team started off giving a wonderful complimentary comments about the C-17 workforce and management, then proceeded to lambaste the commercial piece of the company located just on the other side of the airfield. Basically, it was because there was no employee involvement on that side of the airfield. I felt very embarrassed by that, but was also amazed and pleased at what we'd managed to pull off.
When you became vice president and general manager of airlift and tanker programs, and you got that promotion, and now it's all yours, what was your main objective at that point? What were you trying to achieve?
If you've ever worked on a big program, or maybe any program, there's always myriads of issues that come up that need to be resolved. However, in addition to this day-to-day stuff, we needed to sell more airplanes. Earlier in the program, we had a 220 airplane contract. Later, at a major reset, that number was reduced to 120, and then, when we were not performing, to 40 at the lowest point in the program, the bad point. Later on, as our performance improved, we got the 120 program restored with a unique multi-year contract program. As you probably know, when you contract with the US government, you typically do it on a year-by-year basis. And each year you need both appropriations and authorizations. If you don't get both of them, you don't get your contract. This program was for 7 years. We still needed it to be appropriated for each year, but we didn't need it to be authorized. This is magical in terms of long-term planning, because it means all your suppliers see that you've got the orders way out there, and therefore they are willing to invest because they can recoup that investment in the later lot years. And the other brilliant piece of a multi-year contract, at least in this case, was we were allowed to move monies from the out-year lots and spend it in now years. It sounds like stealing, but just let me give you a silly example. If I got a $100 contract for 10 years, and I take $1 out of my next year contract and use it to fund cost savings in this year's contract, when I get to next year, I've now reduced the cost, so I can live with a reduced budget, and the savings will continue for the remainder of the contract. So we constantly reach forward to move funds in the out years into the now years, using them to invest in quality and cost reductions. And then we would reap the benefit as we went forward. We kept a running total of each project that we approved. Sometimes we achieved no cost savings, sometimes a 200% cost savings. But overall, I think our cost savings were about 80% of what we predicted. The last lot buy of the airplane was going to cost a heck of a lot less than the earlier. And what that meant was we could bid, and we did bid, for a program for 60 more airplanes with a 25% cost reduction. out of a $200 million aeroplane, which meant those 60 aeroplanes, on average, would cost $150 million each. And the Air Force didn't really know what to do with this offer initially. Then finally they said, okay. So that took us to 180 aeroplanes. And then because everyone got to love this aeroplane, the number went to over 250 that the USAF took. And we also sold them to the UK, to Australia, to Canada, and to India. I sort of lost track as I left the program in 2000. But all of that was enabled by this constant focus on quality improvement and cost reduction. That was one of the major things that we focused on. In addition, we focused on things where the customer was looking for improvements, one of which was an extended range capability. We added fuel tanks over the fuselage. Now, this is a very big airplane. The wings are very big and very deep, and that whole chunk of space above the cockpit and the cargo compartment was just sitting there empty. However, this change was a big cultural issue with the Air Force. A lot of people did not want fuel above them when they were flying in the airplane. In some ways, I don't blame them. But in the end, we convinced them that it was doable. I forget what ship it cut in, but we cut in reasonably soon. And of course, the operators loved the extra range. It also gave them the ability, when they landed in a remote site, to offload fuel for use in other vehicles. And then, wonder of wonders, the Air Force said, we now want to retrofit all the earlier planes with this same capability. I think that retrofit program is still going on.
The number of airplanes I remember, David, I think ultimately it got well over 350.
David, you then went from the C17 program to aerospace support and became the president of aerospace support. What was different about it? What were the challenges that it was facing?
Yes, I was asked to leave my wonderful C17 program and lead the aerospace support organization. This was an organization that was doing okay. It wasn't a winner, and to be quite honest, we, like a lot of other aerospace companies, view support as a kind of necessary evil. It's kind of like when you go to a new car dealership, all the shiny new cars that get you excited are in the front showroom. You go around the back to where they're changing the oil and the tires and things of that kind of boring stuff. But it's necessary. However, I think things have changed lately. In a lot of cases, it is a low-margin business because the government, as systems get older, compete that work to typically low-budget operations. If you look at the government budget process, all the arguments are about the procurement of new weapon systems. But there's this whole slug of support money that must come every year to keep all of its weapon systems going. In essence, why buy them if you aren't going to maintain them? And in addition, the customers always want upgrades, which usually come in the avionics of the aircraft. I forget how many upgrade blocks the C17 has, but it's many, many blocks, typically on a yearly basis, although not necessarily so. It is not a very exciting business, but it is a very necessary business. I think only lately have companies begun to take more interest in the support business. I think Boeing Commercial used to either outsource or let airlines and third-party people do the maintenance upgrades of Boeing airplanes. But sometimes in the last 20 years, they decided no, they wanted to maintain their own airplanes. I think all the new ones that are coming out typically have a maintenance package with them in order to obviously help take care of the brand and their image.
So you kind of have this program, and it's not a sexy program. It's not where people kind of want to be. Is it fair to say that some of the people there that were in the program were not perceived well within the company, or the program itself was not perceived particularly well within the company?
I suspect if you were to ask that question, the answer would be, oh no, we like them, sort of, but here's a personal example. I went to McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis in 1964 as a young engineer, and I would have left the company if they'd said I had to work on the support side of the business. I wanted to work on the exciting little pointy airplanes, which are kind of fun, and sometimes getting to meet with the jet jockeys that fly them. I went back to St. Louis in 2000 to lead the aerospace support business, a business I wanted nothing to do with in 1964. After we had been working it for a while and had managed to shift the culture, we found out that the young engineers on the hotshot F-18 program were calling up their friends in the support side of the business and saying, "Hey, I hear you're doing good stuff over there. How do we get to be part of it?" How fantastic is that? And you do that by culture shift. I don't think I ever said I'm going to change the culture, but we did change the culture.
Let's talk about that for a minute. You have people now wanting to get into your organization when it perhaps wasn't as well respected before. You've got this enthusiasm. You're seeing superior results. You eventually win the Malcolm Baldrige Award in 2003. What did you do from a leadership standpoint to really begin that culture shift?
Probably the thing that I did that was most visible was saying, we're going to use the Malcolm Baldrige criteria. When you think about it, I had just come from an award-winning program, a fantastic program at that point, where everything was incredible.
It was also, David, the most profitable program in the company.
I won't tell you how much money we made on each airplane, but it was good.
You split it with the Air Force too, in the process, and it became the most profitable program in the company. I think the last time I looked, for 11 years in a row.
There's nothing like leading a winning program because you tend to get all the credit, which is unfair, but you do anyway. One thing I did, which I didn't think about at the time as much, was I moved back to St. Louis. So I was there all the time. I got to work early, probably 6 o'clock in the morning. I stayed late, probably 6:30 at night, and was very visible. I was very approachable. I had an open door policy. Anyone could come and talk to me, and they did. I even got to know the janitors cleaning the offices by their first names. We used the employee involvement process over again, and we used the concept of executive champions. If you look at the Baldrige criteria, it has 7 categories. Each of the categories sort of fit a leader in our organization. The first one is leadership, which means that I led it. Another one was customer relations, marketing, sales, whatever you want to call it. I assigned it to the vice president of those pieces of my business to lead that category. Subsequently, we held an offsite where I said, we're going to review each category, but we're not going to talk about running the business per se. We're going to look at what we're doing in relation to the criteria. And so, as you can imagine, we had all of these people who were pretty proud of the fact that they were vice presidents and they didn't do any real work. I'm being kind of snotty just to make the point. I said, I want each of you to stand up in front of us and tell us what your score is on the Malcolm Baldrige criteria and how you're going to increase it. And you can't get someone else to stand up for you. You've got to do it. They were mightily embarrassed at the first meeting because they hadn't done anything and they didn't know how to do anything relative to improving their score. So the second time we did it, guess what? They had talked to people who could help them. I brought some people in from Long Beach, one of whom was Debbie Collard. And I know you're going to talk to her later. Debbie was my right-hand person. She knows all about the criteria and understands best practices and was just waiting to help them. I can still remember to this day the turnaround the marketing people made when they realized they didn't even know who their customers were and where they would fit. Gradually, each one of those leaders improved the score of their area by doing good things. One or two of the leaders didn't understand initially, and so I would have a quiet conversation one-on-one with them when I would say, "What part of what I'm trying to do you do not understand? And why are you not supporting me?" Eventually, everyone either got on board or acted like they were on board. And in one sense, that's all you really want. And then everyone that works for these leaders says he or she's got it, and they follow him or her. And it flows down such the whole team ultimately gets it.
David, one of the things that I think is amazing about your story, and you and I have had a chance to talk about this many times before, but it's the fact that you had this leadership team in place that you basically inherited when you took over the position. And that team pretty much stayed in place throughout this whole change. There wasn't a big turnover. You didn't go in and clean house. You basically changed the perspective and attitude and areas of emphasis among the leadership team itself. Could you just talk a little bit about that and about how you went about doing that and achieving that?
Yes. And now looking back on it, that's kind of amazing to me too. Because I know when I showed up, I would have loved to bring my team in from Long Beach and kick all the local lot out. But you can't do that. In fact, my boss did not want me to make any changes for the first few months anyway. I remember there's a book or an article about not making any leadership changes in the first 100 days or something like that. And so I lived with the team that I had. And of course, it sort of goes back to what the boss wants to get done, ultimately will get done if he or she wants it to get done, both good and bad. I can remember when Jim McNerney, who later led Boeing, moved from GE to 3M and said, "We're going to use Lean Six Sigma." And you know what? 3M used Lean Six Sigma everywhere. As you go forward with change, you get internal resistance, and sometimes you get fifth column resistance, where if you can see the resistance, you can talk to them about it, which I did. As you know, Jim Collins uses the term "get on the bus." Those that don't get on the bus, the ones that talk against you or against the program, but not to you, those are harder to fix. Debbie's job was to help everybody, and she was willing to do that. So she spent a lot of time flying on airplanes, flying to all these different parts of the organization. She was also, in a nice way, a spy, because people would say things to her that they wouldn't say to me. Of course, then she told me, and they knew that she was going to tell me. So then I could go to work on those things. I can remember a couple of things that I did as a leader, which were hopefully instinctively. We had one contract with the UK government that was not going well, and they were not happy. So we called a meeting in St. Louis. Everyone's assembled at a U-shaped table with my seat at the head. I walked in and shook hands with everyone in the room, most of whom I did not know. But I just shook hands to say, "Hello, welcome." Afterwards, one of the attendees came to me and said, "You don't know how powerful that was. You acknowledging those people as human beings and working with them to solve the problem." I think the personal touch is so powerful. And fortunately, I have kind of an easy style. People feel that they can talk to me, and so they do. I'm not standoffish, and I know that helps. And another thing, when you start at a company, you don't even know where the bathroom is. Then you get actually immersed in it and know what's going on. But it can be very hard to get your job done in a bureaucratic organization. Now, when people get to the highest levels of the company, they often forget how hard it is at the lower levels. I don't think I ever forgot. I think I always remembered the way it was in those days when you were a peon and everyone to seem to pee on you. And I always tried to be understanding and to help people when they couldn't get their job done because of bureaucracy.
So in 2003, the organization wins the Malcolm Baldrige Award for service. First time a leader has led an organization in manufacturing and service to win the Malcolm Baldrige Award. What was the reaction in the organization? How did people feel about that achievement? And you personally, how did you feel about that achievement?
I actually felt that it was incredible that we managed to do it, even though it was a goal. I remember we had an off-site meeting in Kansas when we were trying to get ready for a site visit by the Baldrige examining team. I sensed that we were not getting to where we needed to be. So I walked to the front of the room and said, "Hey, this is maybe your only chance to be on a Baldrige winning organization." I probably didn't say it, but the reality was, if I wasn't leading it, it wouldn't happen. That's not bravado. It's just that I wanted to do it, partly because when you receive the Baldrige Award in one organization and go on and run another one, you're sort of honor bound to use it. I mean, how can you continue to walk around bragging about what you've done if you're not doing it anymore? I wanted it. I
Right.
wanted it for the image it would set, and I wanted it for the people, and to recognize that the people had changed. At some point, we can have a discussion about innovation. I know a lot of stuff is written about it being a process, and you can use this process to drive it. I'm not sure I agree with that, but one thing I do agree with is, if the culture is right, you will get innovation. If everyone gets killed every time they try something and it doesn't work, you will not get innovation. We had such an organization. When I was in Long Beach, the research arm of then McDonnell Douglas and later Boeing used to come to us to try new things. One time I said to them, "Why do you always come to us?" They said, "Because you will always try new things." One of the improvements they developed was to replace every fastener on the airplane with coated fasteners that prevent corrosion. They are much easier to install, and they don't create hazardous waste, and they work wonderfully well. But we're the only ones in the company that tried it. And again, it's that culture of letting people be innovative.
And connected with that, in both programs, you had a big emphasis on employee involvement. Could you say a little bit about, the employee involvement fit into the change overall and the things that happened as a result of it?
Another name is self-directed work teams. And we did some of that where the natural supervisor of the team, probably part of management, wasn't the self-directed work team's leader. The self-directed work team leader was a union member. We formed teams where the manufacturing, engineering, supply management, and quality people all in the room together, working together. There was no "Bill's not here" or "I've got to go over to the other side of the company." They were all there, which drives accountability and a shared sense of responsibility and achievement. We had 4 levels of employee involvement. When the teams got to each level, we would have a lunch with them. I found that these people had gone from hating each other earlier to become a team. They were teasing each other about their lack of hair or the size of the waistline and things of that kind. They were really having a good time at lunch. And they would probably make a presentation to show how well they were doing. And then I'd say to them, "Okay, now you got to pay for your lunch." They would look at me kind of funny. "You mean he's going to make us pay for this?" And I point out, no, the way you pay for it is to tell everyone how great employee involvement is. It really did change the way the teams on the factory floor operated. They'd have all their metrics out showing how well they were doing, and they would explain them to you. They took ownership of their work, and they were happy when they solved issues, and they were happy when they got savings in production, less man hours, shorter span time. It was incredible. Bill had a big hand in it, and a man by the name of Ed Chenille was our point man on C17, and later helped us in St. Louis when we used it there. Initially, it was only the blue-collar workforce, but later we extended it to the white-collar as well.
I remember one time when the Baldrige came in, they would come in on the off shifts and just go around and talk to people. to see if what was being said on the day shift was actually happening in the evening and overnight. And they were amazed. It was at least as good on the off shifts as it was during the day. And that's part of what carried the day for the program, was the fact that it ran right straight through the organization. It was part of the culture.
Yes, one of those stories occurred at one of our remote sites. We had 10 major sites around the US and 130 sites in total around the world. The Baldrige assessment team came to our headquarters in St. Louis, and then they chose to go to Mesa, Arizona, where we refurbished F-5 aircraft. As a courtesy, we gave them a company airplane to take them there. So it's now time for them to come back to St. Louis. The crew had filed a flight plan, and as the team started to walk to the airplane, a woman ran out of the building yelling at the team, saying, "You haven't talked to me. I want to share my story with you." So the visiting team had the courtesy to stop on the tarmac and listen to her tell her story.
David, you've had two organizations that did extraordinary things, amazing transformation that occurred. If you were to sort of capture 3 or 4, lessons that you think are most important from that experience, what would they be?
Well, these days it is trite to say it's all about leadership, but of course, it's all about leadership. Now, leaders come in all different sizes and different shapes, but key attributes include caring for people, respect for people, trust for people. Southwest used to have a mantra that said, hire for attitude, train for skills. I think that's really true. And one of the things that just amazed me was when I was in a meeting, and it could be a budget meeting or some other area that I wasn't trained in, everyone would defer to me, which is kind of scary, like I knew it all. And of course I didn't. I was just winging it and hoping that they knew what they were doing. But it's all about leadership. And I would say maybe one other thing about being a leader is having self-confidence. You've got to act like you believe it can be done, even when on the inside you haven't a clue. You're thinking, I hope these people know how to do it. So the main thing is leadership. The other takeaway, I think, is even if you don't want to apply for a National Quality Award, use the criteria anyway. They are founded in the best practices around. They have been honed over many, many years since 1987. And even if you don't set up a formal thing, look at the criteria, use them. If you can answer them, then you're doing okay. And I'll give you an example of that. We had a man by the name of Jim Berry working at McDonnell Douglas when I joined the C17 program. He'd bounced around the industry a bit, and after a while he left C17, he left McDonnell Douglas, and he went to Lockheed Martin and ended up running a division in Dallas, Lockheed Missiles and Space. Many, many years later, I got a call from him. He was someone that I really barely knew in Long Beach, but I guess he knew me enough to contact me. He asked me to fly to Dallas to meet him and talk about applying for the Baldrige Award. It was his last year at Lockheed Martin, as he was going to retire. He wasn't going to go any higher, even though his division was doing very well. So I flew to Dallas and talked to him. Later, he hired some consultants to write a Baldrige application for his division. He hadn't used the Baldrige criteria at all, and yet they were able to translate what he was doing into the Baldrige criteria and answer all the questions. Based on this application, they received an award, which means if you just do good stuff, it's okay. So you don't have to use the criteria. If you know how to do your job anyway and are doing well, more power to you. But the dummies like me who don't know how, the criteria are a primer. A typical question about leadership might be, how do you, a leader, ensure an ethical organization? And you think, do I do that? I hope I do that. And if you can write an answer down, you're probably doing it. And the last one is investing in employee involvement, because I think it is so powerful in bringing everyone together. There's one other thing I haven't talked about, and that is recognition. In Long Beach, we chose the best performing teams in the organization, and we would have an event once a year to recognize them. We called it the Silver Eagle Awards. It was like our Oscar night. We'd rent the Disneyland Hotel, and we'd invite all the team winners to have dinner, bring their spouses or significant others. We'd put on tuxedos, and we would introduce these teams, many from the factory floor, who spent their life in coveralls. They would be up there on the stage with you, the men dressed nicely and the women wearing nice dresses. It was very powerful. Then in aerospace support, we did the same thing, except we let the team rename it. They called it the Atlas Awards, because we were standing on top of the world. The team wanted to go to Las Vegas to do it. I didn't want to go to Vegas, but we went anyway. We had a big awards ceremony, which made the people incredibly proud. A typical comment when the team got back to wherever they came from by those who didn't get to go was, "How did you get to go to Vegas? I want to go." And of course, the answer was, you get to go by doing good things and achieving good performance. So recognition and then engaging the employees is very powerful.
Yeah.
That's a great list. Leadership, having that self-confidence as you're demonstrating that leadership, using the Baldrige criteria, employee involvement, emphasizing the importance of recognition. My last question is really, if you were to give advice to an executive who's looking at an organization perhaps that's in a difficult spot right now, and they're trying to turn it around, they're trying to transform it, is there anything else you might add that you would recommend that they think about or do?
There are days when you're actually not feeling that good. And it was then that I felt I needed my kitchen cabinet. 4 or 5 people who I could go to and say, "What the hell over? I'm dying here. What are we going to do?"
Yeah.
I think for most leaders it can be very powerful and effective, because leadership is a lonely thing. When you're the top leader of an organization, you feel that the whole responsibility falls on you. Debbie was a key member of the kitchen cabinet, and it included Jay Katmeyer and Jeff Deckelbaum. With all of them, all of the kitchen cabinet, you can let your hair down. You know that they won't go out and tell the world you really don't know what you're doing. We could cheer each other up, and you could come up with some solutions for some very difficult problems in the darkness of the room, and then bring it out into the light and say, "Hey, we're going to do whatever it was you needed to do."
David, thank you very much. This has been wonderful getting the opportunity to chat with you about your experiences. Thanks very much.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you have any questions or would like to speak with a transformation specialist, please contact us at info@ascensionts.com. Thanks for listening.